Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The stars above Sector 9. 7-7 shimmered like frozen embers, distant and uncaring. For as long as anyone could remember, this corner of the galaxy had been silent. Too silent. It belonged to the Zalari Dominion, a name that made lesser species vanish and smugglers turn back mid-flight. Nothing entered without permission. Nothing left without scars. But today, that silence cracked. Something had arrived. It wasn't loud. It wasn't glowing. It didn't send a message. It just appeared. Huge, metallic, and unmistakably human. It hovered between the twin asteroid rings of the Zalari border like it had always been there. Like it belonged. On the bridge of the Dominion outpost, alarms buzzed. Commander Threxon, with his coiled antennae twitching in disbelief, leaned forward toward the holoscreen. "Confirm again," he growled, mandibles clenching. "That can't be Earth class." The technician double-checked the scans. The reading was steady. A human warship. Class. Heavy dreadnought. Identification. Vanguard 12. No markings. Someone muttered. No transponder. Just sitting there. "But why here?" Another voice whispered. "They're not supposed to be here." That was the problem. No one had seen a human warship this deep into Dominion space since the Cold Verge Treaty. And those who remembered that time didn't talk about it, because the last time humanity came uninvited, entire fleets disappeared without explanation. Threxon narrowed his four eyes. "Activate full alert. Send word to High Command. Lock the sector." His claws clicked against the comms panel. "This is not a drill." Still, the human ship made no move. No engines, no weapons, no lights. But in its stillness, it said everything. It hadn't come to ask. It had come to remind. The warship didn't move, but its silence echoed louder than any threat. On board the Dominion command bridge, the air had turned thick with fear. The officers spoke in hushed tones, like they were afraid the ship might hear them. Tactical readouts flickered with warnings. Unregistered ship class, unknown systems, possible stealth configuration. Commander Threxon stood stiff at the center of the chaos, every scale on his back raised with instinctual dread. He had served for 40 cycles and faced down pirate kings and star plague outbreaks. But this felt older, deeper, wrong. "They're testing us," one of the lieutenants said, voice shaking, "seeing how we react." "No," Threxon replied, watching the unmoving dreadnought. "They're watching to see if we remember." Behind him, a junior officer stepped forward, clutching a datapad. "Sir, transmission intercepts from the outlying colonies are starting to circulate. Civilian ships are grounding. There's panic already. One human ship, and the outer sectors are preparing for evacuation." The commander's claws tightened. That was the problem. It wasn't just a warship. It was what the warship meant. For decades, humanity had been quiet. Too quiet. After the signing of the Cold Verge Treaty, they had pulled back, cutting off long-range patrols, halting outer expansion, disbanding most of their Black Ops fleets. The galaxy saw it as surrender, a retreat. The old empires whispered that the Terrans had finally grown tired, finally broken under their own weight. But those who fought in the old wars knew better. Humanity didn't surrender. Humanity watched. They studied. They waited. And now, without warning, without cause or declaration, they were here again. The question wasn't why. The question was what had finally pushed them to move. Aboard Vanguard 12, the mood was the complete opposite. Commander Hal Reeve leaned against the steel frame of the viewport, arms crossed, gaze steady on the flickering specks of Dominion ships darting across the black. His bridge was dim, quiet, humming with systems the Dominion hadn't even dreamed of yet. Behind him, navigation techs worked calmly. No one rushed, no one shouted. It was the kind of stillness that only came from certainty. Lieutenant Mira Van stood beside him, reading off status logs from the tactical console. Dominion fleet has increased to 21 ships in the area, mostly destroyers and recon classes. They're holding back, but slowly encircling. Of course they are, Reeve said quietly. They're predators. And predators circle when they're scared. Mira looked up. Should we say anything? Reeve shook his head. We already did. There was no need for messages. The Vanguard's presence was the message. For too long, the galaxy had mistaken silence for surrender. They had forgotten what it meant when a human warship arrived unannounced. What it meant when they came without fanfare, without explanation. When the humans didn't shout or posture, but simply showed up. And now, they were remembering. The stakes were bigger than one ship, bigger than one sector. Somewhere out there, deep in the Dominion's secret vaults, behind 1,000 locked doors, something had happened. Something the humans could not ignore. And the Dominion knew it. In the Dominion capital, on the fortress moon of Vraxis III, panic was blooming behind closed doors. The Council of Sectors had been summoned in full for the first time in 20 cycles. Inside the hollowed chamber, delegates argued over intercepted transmissions and fleet formations. Half wanted to launch a full assault on the Vanguard immediately. The other half weren't sure that would even do anything. At the head of the chamber, High Minister Aurelius slammed his staff against the obsidian floor. This warship is no accident. It's an act of war. It hasn't fired, came the voice of a cooler-headed admiral. It hasn't moved. It hasn't sent a single signal. It doesn't have to, Aurelius snapped. Look at the outer colonies. Look at the comm chatter. Every station near Sector 977 is flooding our channels with evacuation requests. The mere sight of one Terran vessel and our own citizens are running. Then maybe we should be asking why they're so afraid, said another voice. Silence followed. The truth was, no one knew what the humans wanted. But the fact that they had come this far, without cloaking, without allies, and simply waited, that said more than 1,000 declarations of war. Back aboard the Vanguard, Mira tapped another log. Commander, we've intercepted a new signal, internal Dominion transmission, high priority, mentions something about a facility, black level clearance. Reeve didn't move, but his voice went tight. Where? Encrypted, but triangulating. Appears to be somewhere near the Pelnor Rift. A known Dominion black site zone. Coordinates locked. He nodded slowly. Then we're in the right place. She hesitated. Sir, is this about the prisoners? Reeve finally turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. They took something they shouldn't have. Someone. And we're just going to take them back? No, he said. We're going to make sure the whole galaxy knows why you don't take from us. She nodded once. There was no bravado in his voice, no threat, just fact. Because this mission wasn't just about a rescue. It was a warning. If the Dominion didn't return what they had taken, humanity wouldn't ask again. They would take back everything, starting with their people, and ending with the truth that everyone had tried to bury. That Earth was not a forgotten force or a broken memory. It was a storm, waiting for the right moment. And now, the first winds had begun to howl. On the outer edge of the sector, Dominion reinforcements blinked into position. 20 more warships, silent and tense, forming a perimeter around the vanguard. Inside their ships, crew whispered stories they weren't supposed to know. Rumors of how Earth ships could move without engines, of how they could vanish mid-battle, of human commanders who stared death in the face and grinned. Commander Threxon received the latest fleet report and stared at the formation. They were preparing to box in the vanguard, trap it, force a surrender. But a thought gnawed at him. What if this wasn't the trap? What if the humans wanted them all here? What if the warship wasn't the threat, but the bait? He stared at the calm human ship and felt something he hadn't felt since the old war. Dread, real dread. And the warship still didn't move. It didn't have to. It was waiting for the answer. Or for silence. The Dominion fleet hovered in formation, circling like vultures that couldn't decide whether the meal was dead or dangerous. Ships that once patrolled the stars with confidence now drifted with unease, their crews hushed, movements careful, as if the blackness of space itself had turned against them. On board the command destroyer Ravager's Eye, Admiral Velric stood at the helm, his upper arms crossed while the lower pair worked controls with muscle memory. The holographic readout of the sector's tactical layout showed the human warship in the center like a single, unmoving point of gravity. Every Dominion ship adjusted its course based on that one object, like stars rearranging themselves around a black hole. "There's still no response?" he asked. His first officer nodded. No hails returned, no energy spikes, no signs of active scanning. Velrix narrowed his eyes. Then why do I feel like it's listening to everything we say? Silence on the bridge. Behind him, analysts whispered about the Vanguard 12. Its specifications were out of date, older than Dominion archives, yet its hull signature was unreadable. It didn't match any class currently fielded by Terran forces, and yet somehow it looked newer, upgraded, as if it had been rebuilt in secret, made stronger in the shadows. No one could prove it, but they all felt it. This ship wasn't just powerful, it was purposeful. Velrix turned toward his second-in-command. "Pull recon drones from orbit. I want real-time visuals." Moments later, grainy video feeds filled the bridge. The human warship sat in space like a blade unsheathed, not glowing with menace, but exuding it nonetheless. Its exterior was plain. No insignia, no paint, no pride. Just raw, scarred armor. Then, as the drones closed in, something changed. The warship blinked. Not literally, but the drones lost signal for 0.8 seconds. Every feed, every camera, just darkness. And then it returned. "Replay that," Velric snapped. They did. Same thing. The human ship hadn't moved. It hadn't fired. But the Dominion's eyes had gone blind for less than a second, and that was enough. Everyone on the bridge knew what that meant. It could shut them out whenever it wanted. Velric stepped back from the feed, trying to steady his thoughts. I want updated scans every 10 seconds, and I want an open line to Vrax's High Command. This isn't a standoff anymore. Back on the Vanguard 12, Commander Reeve stood alone in the observation deck, the stars mirrored across the reinforced glass. His reflection stared back at him, sharp-eyed, lean, weathered from years of watching his people forgotten. His hands were clasped behind his back, and though he hadn't spoken in several minutes, the bridge crew didn't dare interrupt. They knew what this was. This wasn't about intimidation. It was about presence. Reeve finally broke the silence. Begin Phase 1. The voice of Lieutenant Mira answered through the comms, steady and crisp. Confirmed. Phase 1 initiated. Cloaked units deploying. In the black space behind the Vanguard, silent shadows drifted free. 7 stealth frigates, painted in dark adaptive armor, slipped from the warship's undercarriage like phantoms. No thrusters, no lights, just cold glides, riding on gravitational drift. Each one locked into position with mechanical precision, surrounding the Dominion's circling fleet from multiple angles. And no one saw them coming. Not yet. On the Ravager's eye, alarms didn't go off. The Dominion scanners didn't scream. Instead, a low hum began to fill the air, barely noticeable, like the sound of static in the back of the mind. Officers adjusted their headsets. Screens flickered for just a second before stabilizing. Velrix looked around sharply. What was that? No one answered. They didn't know. Then the messages started. Not from the human warship, but from within the Dominion's own ships. False signals, looping comms, sensor ghosts appearing in places they shouldn't. One by one, system logs began to confuse themselves. Names of ships were swapped, coordinates inverted, backup files replaced with corrupted entries. We're being jammed, someone said, but it's not jamming, it's deeper. Velrix turned slowly, realization dawning. It's not noise, he whispered. It's language. The human ship wasn't just blocking their signals. It was understanding them, speaking back, not with words, but with data, with code. And the Dominion systems didn't know how to defend against that. He barked, shut down non-critical comms, switch to hardwired backup relays, lock down nav systems, and re-isolate fire control. It was too late. Across 5 ships, fire control blinked into standby mode. Weapons were offline, and the Dominion still had no proof that the human ship had done anything at all. Inside the Vanguard's command center, Mira gave the latest report. Confirmed. 3 destroyers now running internal resets. 1 battlecruiser has lost communications with its support squadron. They think it's a malfunction. Reeve nodded, his voice low. Let them think that. How close are we to the Pelnor Rift? 2 light minutes. If we jump, we'll arrive within 40 seconds. Hold position. Mira looked at him. They're still trying to figure out what's happening. If we wait too long, they might figure it out. They won't, he said, because they still believe we play by their rules. She paused. And if they're right? Reeve looked up at the stars, his voice soft and dangerous. Then it's time we change the rules. Back in Dominion High Command, panic was quietly blooming. A secret channel had just come online, encrypted under 37 layers of clearance. A single message appeared on every command screen. Return them. No origin tag, no sender name, just 2 words burned into the network. Someone whispered, "Is that from the ship?" Another voice replied, "No. It's deeper than that. It's in the Dominion net." A full blackout was ordered in less than 6 minutes, but it was too late. In orbit over Sector 977, the Vanguard 12 sat calm, steady, waiting. Its weapons still cold, its shields still down. But around it, the Dominion was unraveling. And Reeve hadn't fired a single shot. Not yet. The Dominion blackout protocols were designed to be absolute. A full purge of communication links, AI routines, and internal data trees. Nothing in or out. It had been enacted only twice in Dominion history. Once during the breach of Ornikal, when an alien virus crippled a defense grid, and once during the final hour of the Thaler siege, right before the humans showed the galaxy what true silence meant. And now it had been triggered again. Across the fleet surrounding Vanguard 12, shipboard systems dimmed, auto-targeting locked down. Ship-to-ship chatter fell quiet. Captains gave orders the old way, by hand, by voice, by instinct. But even then, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. Because while the Dominion was powering down, the humans weren't doing anything. That was the most terrifying part. Nothing. The human warship remained where it was, motionless and mute, like a tombstone for forgotten empires. But the stillness didn't bring relief. It brought dread, because it wasn't passive. It was waiting. On board the Vanguard 12, the bridge was as calm as ever. No alarms, no blinking red lights, just quiet, controlled focus. Commander Reeve studied the latest tactical overlay as it hovered in the center of the bridge. Dominion ships were now spacing themselves out, adjusting for redundancies they didn't trust their systems to deliver. Their formations were shifting, not tighter for attack, but looser, afraid of being too close when something happened. Lieutenant Mira spoke without looking away from her console. Blackout confirmed across 93% of the fleet. Sensor feeds have gone manual. We're monitoring isolated signals. They've cut most of their comms entirely. "Any word from Pelnor?" Reeve asked. She hesitated. One burst transmission, Dominion encryption, short range. Routed through a tight beam relay toward Vraxis Sector 8. Could be a warning. Or a request for help, Reeve muttered. Doesn't matter. They won't get it in time. He stepped away from the main display, walking slowly toward the viewport that looked out onto the void. Somewhere out there, just beyond the orbital fringe, sat the real target. Pelnor Rift. Dominion-designated Deep Zone 9C. The Black Site. That was why they were here. They hadn't come for territory, not revenge, not even war. They'd come for the ones Dominion didn't want anyone to know they had taken. Inside the Dominion capital, a hidden chamber buried beneath the layers of command complexes buzzed with activity. It was not part of the regular network. It didn't exist in the registry. It wasn't on any official map. But it was watching everything. The Dominion Shadow Directorate operated where the light couldn't reach. and they knew exactly who was sitting above Sector 977. "He knows," said Director Jun, staring at the projection of the Vanguard 12. "There's no other reason they'd send Reeve." Across the room, senior operatives exchanged uneasy glances. Reeve wasn't just a commander. He was the ghost. One of the last field agents from the Terran Silence Division, disbanded in name but whispered about in darkened war rooms ever since. No one saw him unless he wanted to be seen, and when he showed up, it was already too late. "What does he want?" someone asked. Jun didn't answer right away. He was thinking, calculating, not about the ship, but what it represented. "Pelnor," he said finally. "It's the only answer." But those records were wiped. Another voice offered weakly. "Wiping records doesn't erase truth. It only hides it from the lazy. He's not lazy." "But even if he knows," someone else said, "he can't reach it." Jun turned toward them slowly, his voice a cold whisper. "Are you sure about that?" The room fell silent. Pelnor Rift spun quietly in the dark, a swirling pocket of spatial interference and gravity shadows. To any normal scanner, it was just another unstable anomaly, a patch of dead space that made navigation systems glitch and automated pilots steer clear. But to someone who knew what to look for, it wasn't dead. It was hiding something. Inside the rift's inner edge, buried inside an asteroid husk that had been carved hollow by machines long ago, lay Site Theta, known only to a handful of Dominion high-clearance scientists and shadow military leaders. It had no name on record, no transponder. Its power signature was masked under the rift's radiation. But it wasn't empty. Inside were 5 cells, and 4 of them had been filled with humans. For months, Dominion bioengineers had tried to understand what they had taken. The captives weren't regular citizens. They were quiet, resourceful, strong-willed even after sedation. One had military implants that didn't match any known configuration. Another spoke 6 galactic dialects, refusing to reveal how she'd learned them. But the real mystery was the 5th cell. She looked like a girl. 12, maybe 13. Didn't speak, didn't sleep, didn't blink much either. Her readings made no sense. Heart rate shifted, according to the room's activity. Brain waves spiked in sync with nearby machinery. Sometimes doors opened when she stared at them. They called her Subject 5. But she called herself nothing because she didn't speak. She listened. And she was still listening now. Eyes closed, body still. But in her mind, something shifted. Far above, in orbit, something familiar had arrived. And she had felt it, not through data, not through signal, through something deeper. A pattern, a presence. She opened her eyes, and for the first time since she was taken, she smiled. On board the Vanguard 12, Commander Reeve had returned to the center of the bridge. "Begin Phase 2, he said. Mira looked up. Confirmed. Behind her, cloaked frigates began to move. One drifted toward the rift, silent and slow. Another circled behind a Dominion patrol ship and vanished from its scope in under a second. Each one had a mission. Some would cut off communications, Others would map enemy formations from the inside. But one had a single goal: breach Site Theta. And Reeve knew if she was still alive, she would know they were coming. She would be ready. Because she was never just a girl. She was why they came. And now, the galaxy was about to remember what happened when humans didn't knock. They entered. The frigate designated Spectre, 3 broke from the formation like a shadow slipping under a door. It made no noise, emitted no light, and had no engine trail. To Dominion scanners, it wasn't just invisible, it didn't exist. Only 3 people on the Vanguard 12 even knew its exact path. That was the point. Inside Spectre 3, a team of 6 moved in near-perfect silence. They were former Ghost Division, Black Ops soldiers with no records, no citizenship, and no home. They were the kind of people who got buried before the mission even started. At the front of the team, a tall figure crouched beside the airlock as the ship coasted into final position. He checked the breach points on his HUD, 3 meters of radiation-shielded plating. Heat signature masked, 1 internal life grid beneath. Silent sweep confirms light power draw. No alarm trip. Good. This wasn't a prison. It was a secret graveyard, and something was still breathing inside it. Confirm breach vector, whispered a voice behind him. Agent Kale, the team's tech operative. We're aligned with the maintenance hatch. 30 seconds to cut. The leader, Agent Rane, nodded once. Then we go in. No sound, no mistakes. Kale pressed the thermal cutter to the asteroid's edge. A thin blue arc sparked along the seal as microdust boiled off into space. Seconds passed. The cut was clean. The hatch fell inward without a sound, caught by soft field dampeners. One by one, the team slid into the dark. Inside was colder than they expected. Not just physically, though the air was stale and thin, but in feeling. The whole place felt wrong, like it had been abandoned by the living, but not by the watching. Black walls, no lights, no signs, no markers. That was Dominion protocol. If someone discovered the lab, they weren't supposed to understand what it was or what it had done. But the Ghost team wasn't just trained in infiltration. They were trained in memory. And this place smelled like something old. As they moved deeper through the narrow corridors, Agent Rane held up a fist. Stop. Something shifted. Ahead, in the flicker of their low-light visors, a pulse of red glimmered along the wall. Kale stepped forward and traced it with a glove. It was blood, not dry. Someone was still here. Thermal scan, Rane ordered. Kale swept the hallway. 4 readings, 1 elevated. Patterns off. Could be sedation or rapid cognition. It's not Dominion. Rain's voice dropped lower. Then it's them. They moved again, faster now. Each door they passed was sealed. Some showed markings, crude etchings burned into metal. One said, nerve isolation. Another read, language rewrite, phase 2. None of them opened, until they reached the end. 2 Dominion guards stood in front of the final bulkhead. One slouched, the other upright but barely alert. Neither had noticed the humans yet. That was their last mistake. Ronnie moved first. A flash of movement. 1 shot. 1 blade. Silent. Efficient. The guards dropped like sacks. No alarms. Still, no lights. They were in. Rene stepped to the door console. Dominion Biolock. Kyle was already there, tools out. Give me 10. Take 5. The override cracked with a soft hiss, and the door slid open. What lay beyond was quiet. 5 containment cells lined the far wall, each one constructed of hardened polyglass and shielded alloy. Inside, 2 were motionless forms, too still, too pale. The third held a corpse, half covered by a tattered cloth. The fourth, empty. But the fifth, she sat with her legs crossed, facing the wall. Not asleep, not resting, just waiting. Ronnie stepped closer. He didn't speak. He didn't knock. The girl turned her head slightly. Eyes opened. She looked at him. Not with fear, not with surprise, but with recognition. I heard you, she said softly. Ronnie blinked. He hadn't expected her to speak. You felt us coming? He asked. She nodded. When the ship arrived, I felt the pattern change. He glanced at the others, then back at her. Do you know who we are? Ghosts, she said. Same as me. Kale whispered, Sir, her bio readings are spiking. Full neural sync with the surrounding electronics. She's already mapped the corridor. She's wired in? Ronnie asked. Not plugged in, Kale replied. More like tuned in. Like the entire lab is speaking her language. The girl stood, small, barefoot, unarmed. But when she stepped toward the edge of her cell, Rane felt a shiver down his spine. He didn't know why. He just knew the room felt colder when she moved. I'm here to get you out, he said. She stared up at him. And what happens when I'm out? He hesitated, because that answer wasn't simple. We take you home. There is no home, she said. Not for me. Not anymore. Kale whispered, Sir, we're out of time. Dominion patrols are rerouting. They'll be on top of us in less than 4 minutes. Rene nodded. Then we're done talking. He reached for the cell's lock override, but the panel blinked green before he touched it. The door opened. She did it, Kale muttered. The girl stepped out without hesitation. Her feet touched the cold floor with barely a sound. She didn't ask for help. She didn't ask where they were going. She just walked past them like she already knew. Rane turned to follow. But as they reached the main corridor, Kale's scanner beeped once, fast, sharp. Incoming, he hissed. A security force was already moving through the lower level. 12 guards, minimum, full armor, pulse rifles charged. Rane glanced at the girl. She said nothing. But she closed her eyes, and the hallway lights blinked. 1, 2. Then darkness. A second later, every guard's rifle locked up. Power drained, sights dark, shields off. Confused shouting echoed through the corridor, but it didn't last. Because a sudden surge of magnetic feedback knocked out every helmet system at once. Rane didn't fire a shot. He didn't need to. They just walked past the stunned soldiers, still alive, still conscious, but too paralyzed by sensory overload to move. Kale's voice was low. She's not hacking the system, sir. She is the system. Rane didn't respond. He was too busy trying to understand what he'd just seen. Not a child. Not a prisoner. Something else entirely. And now that it was awake, the Dominion wasn't ready. No one was. They reached the extraction hatch. Spectre 3 had already aligned and sealed for evac. The girl climbed aboard first. Rane followed. As the door closed behind them, the asteroid lab went dark. Not damaged, not destroyed. Just shut down. Every light off. Every system idle. No alarms. No communications. The entire base had gone to sleep. And the galaxy would soon learn why you never put a lock on something that doesn't believe in cages. The return to orbit was silent. Inside Spectre 3, the extraction team said nothing as the cloaked frigate drifted like a ghost through the debris fields near the Pelnor Rift. No one asked questions. No one dared. They all felt it, an invisible shift in the air around them, a weight pressing into their skulls like a storm rolling in from beyond the stars. The girl sat quietly near the back, wrapped in a dull gray thermal cloak. No restraints, no fear. She didn't fidget or flinch with every turn of the ship. She just stared through the hull as if it wasn't even there, as if she was already somewhere else. Commander Reeve watched her from the bridge of the Vanguard 12 as the frigate redocked. His jaw was set, eyes cold and unreadable. As she stepped onto the command deck, everyone turned. Even hardened officers who had seen too much stood a little straighter, because they remembered the message that had echoed through Dominion Command days earlier. Return them. And now she was here, returned. But something else had come with her, something no one could name. Within an hour, the Vanguard sensors lit up with incoming signatures. Earth ships, not reinforcements. Containment. 6 vessels bearing Terran Defense Authority marks blinked into existence outside Sector 977. Their transponders read Directive Class. Vessels not built for war, but for isolation, for quarantine, for erasure. At their head, the TDS Resolute, flagship of General Adara Voss. The screen came alive on its own. No ping, no hail request, just her face. Commander Reeve, Voss said, eyes like granite. You brought her back. He didn't flinch. She was ours. She still is. No, Voss replied, voice razor thin. She isn't. Not anymore. Ava stood beside him now, quiet and barefoot, her hair tucked behind her ear in a way that looked innocent, except for the power pulsing silently around her like an unseen electric field. She didn't attack, Reeve said. She disabled a Dominion lab, shut it down without killing anyone. She gave us back 4 survivors. She rewrote enemy military code by thinking about it, Voss interrupted. She destabilized an entire sector of the Dominion without touching a weapon. And now she's standing on a warship capable of launching strikes across 3 systems. She leaned in closer to the feed. Tell me, Commander, if she decides we're the next problem, what exactly stops her? Ava's voice was calm and clear. Fear. That single word froze the room. Voss narrowed her eyes. Is that a threat? No, Ava replied. It's a diagnosis. The connection cut. Reeve turned to her. They're going to fire. Ava blinked slowly. Then they'll teach me something new. Outside, The containment fleet locked weapons. The Vanguard's crew scrambled to stations, unsure if they were defending themselves or her. Sana, at Tactical, whispered, "Shields are holding. But if Earth opens fire—" "They won't," Reeves said. "You sure?" "No." He looked back at Ava. "But she is." Ava didn't blink. She raised her hand, fingers spread like she was reaching into the dark. And then everything changed. Every screen on every Terran ship went black. Not off, just blank. Moments later, a message appeared across them all, written in the old Terran code for ceasefire. No more cages. No systems crashed. No weapons fired. Just silence. And then control returned. The Earth ships backed away. Hours later, the fleet was gone. No shots fired. No deaths. Just withdrawal. As if they knew they couldn't win. Not without becoming the very thing they feared. Ava sat alone in the Vanguard's observation deck, watching the stars stretch across infinity. Commander Reeves stepped beside her, saying nothing at first. Just stood. She didn't look up. "I changed the code," she said. He nodded. "I know." "I didn't mean to scare them." "You didn't. They're just not used to something they can't control." Reeves sat beside her. "Neither am I." She smiled faintly. "What happens now?" "You tell me," he said. "We came to bring you home." She turned her head, the stars reflected in her eyes. "There is no home," she said. "Then let's make one." She looked back out the window. "I want to build something better." Reeves stood, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Then that's what we do." And slowly, gently, the Vanguard 12 turned away from Sector 977 and pointed itself toward the uncharted dark. No orders. No borders. No more waiting. Because Earth hadn't just rescued a girl. They had witnessed the first human not made for war, but made for what came after. And no empire, not dominion, not Earth, was ready for her. But she was ready for everything. The next chapter of humanity had already begun, and she was writing it, one system at a time.